Sid Meier, are you listening? I think we might have found your new mascot for Civ 7. Hey guys, MasakoX here. The topic of today's What If is something that, maybe on the surface to you, it might feel like a bit of a weird one. It's based off of one short scene in Super that may have had consequences later on, sure, in the story, but it actually carries a lot of weight for something that just seemed like, oh, it was there. First of all, Haverock and I have gone on for ages about why Goasu, the current Supreme Kai of Universe 10, decided that, probably the best example of living creatures to show his apprentice was a planet where they had barely decided how clubs worked. Surely there were better selections of planets to pick, and maybe we were being too harsh on the Kai in training after all. Perhaps it's Goasu that did everything wrong. In some ways, he makes Shin look like a consummate professional. Let's say that maybe we did linger in that particular scenario for a little longer, and instead decided to take Zamasu down a different path, which made him into a more benevolent figure, instead of the tyrant that we saw in Super, and he decided to take up real-time strategy games for a change with real peoples. Okay, Masako, be real here. How did you come to this conclusion for a story? Well, that answer's pretty easy. That's all down to our weekly roundtable live streams, where Haverock, Sophie B, and myself talk with you guys and go through your what if suggestions to see what you might be thinking of at the time and what things might work should things have been different in the Dragon world if, say for example, Akira Toriyama got out of bed differently one day. So the initial credit for today's scenario goes to Project Sixum, the asker of this question. We salute you for your lateral thinking when it comes to Zamasu. Thanks to you, Zamasu indeed here did nothing wrong. In the last part, we went to the planet Barbary and saw the initial scene play out, but instead of getting all malicious with the native peoples like he does in the original, Zamasu took pity on them and decided to improve the mortals living on this world with his own guidance, what he thought was best. Zamasu knows best. Maybe we should actually make that into a proper song parody. And also show these fools who the real rulers of this universe were. It's a two-pronged approach, actually. He would cure his itch to make everything better in their world, to show that he was more superior, and also he'd be able to make the case for him becoming the full-time Supreme Kai of Universe 10 eventually, when Goasu either retires, or does something silly. Which is sounding more likely the latter. Anyway, Zamasu befriended one of the barbarians that he met, who was named Rawad, to carry his message to the peoples, and things actually went really well with him and his followers to the point where we find ourselves now, 200 years in the future, with the Time Ring's assistance. But things may have gotten a little bit tricky with two groups seemingly opposing each other, and I don't think it has anything to do with what their favourite colour is. Now before we begin, I would like to point out that the MasakoX merch store has actually launched some brand new cool merch as of late, including the strongest mama out here, and the Ranch Through Time Future Edition to complete the Ranch Through Time set, as well as this compilation poster of all four mimicking the designs of the 90s for you in 18x24 glory. Go to masako.cc/store to give these a look, and thank you for your time. So as we had established in the previous outing, our Kai in training was showing that, really, he can do well playing a proper leader, albeit from afar. Zamasu had brought the barbarians to some level of advancement in very little time. He's basically acted like the monolith from 2001: A Space Odyssey here, only more green and with more fabulous hair. And could talk. Maybe that analogy was a little odd, you see. Now, granted, it's good to see that these peoples were capable of having sprawling kingdoms like this, but that will be all for naught if it all gets torn down by this happening and they just bicker amongst themselves. And what makes the matters worse here is that both armies have flags and banners with his likeness, albeit with slight variations. Now Zamasu gulps to himself as he gazes down on the scene. Perhaps he left things a little too long with the gap between visits. Maybe he should have made it shorter. A couple of centuries? Oh, maybe mortals weren't ready for that level of absence. I know that you're thinking that he could just use the time ring to go back and fix things, take the easy way out here, and he does think about that option. It's very tempting, but no, that's not what a proper Supreme Kai would do. He wouldn't run away from the problem. He promised Goasu he would take responsibility for whatever happened, and this is about to happen. Besides, If he can fix this disaster now, without having to resort to time ring shenanigans, he would be lauded even more than he already is. But it might not be wise to just go blundering in right this second and just go, "Hey everybody, I'm your creator, now stop all this fighting here or I'll have to destroy you." And as the two groups move closer and closer to each other, he hides in the nearby forest, atop of some trees. And by doing so, that gives him a good view on the battlefield as a whole and materializes some hooded robes so as to not have anyone recognize him if they decide to look up, and make things really kick off. And yes, I think Closed Beam is part of Akai's choice of, powers, and we assume that Zamasu would know such a thing. I mean, Piccolo can. Zamasu at the moment's looking a bit wistful, almost missing the days of simpler times, when clubs were the only thing he had to worry about. He leans backwards and just looks to the sky. "Oh, Raoud, what have your descendants done? If only you were here." His musings are cut short, though, when what sounds like the main fracas begins below. The skirmish seems to be pretty brutal, and it seems that the barbarians have taken the smithing lessons to their heart and actually listened, because the weapons that they have created and are using right now seem pretty potent. In this instance, Zamasu does feel a little bit more proud, since at least these puny mortals listened to his instructions and created something useful with their lives. For a while, things settle into the typical affair for this kind of tussle. But there is something in the corner of his eye that catches our young Kai in training's attention. Zamasu watches the two leaders of the factions commanding from the hills and facing each other, and they are decked up in something he had never seen before on these creatures, and it was really impressive. Actual clothes, and not just clothes, suits of armor, which, albeit a little rough around the edges, looked pretty good. Excellent. A fight with honor, something he never thought possible from these people, but now he's seeing it. Maybe a permutation of what he'd instilled in them all that time ago, if a king wants to become the new king, he has to fight the old king, etc. Zamasu has a lot to do and catch up with on Barbary, and so Akai decides to investigate nearby towns to see how the regular folk have progressed. Still cloaked, he decides to really get himself immersed amongst the lay folk. And as he walks through, things seem rather quaint. It had been a while since the time of Rao's ruination, which was the last time that Zamasu was here. He decides that he won't end these mortals just yet. Not everything is lost right now, but one thing's for sure. He needs to find out what caused the situation in the first place, and why his likeness seems to be the focal point of it all. He adjusts his robes using his key, which acts well enough to make him resemble a barbarian in disguise, albeit a small one, and checks the nearby town to hear in on conversations. Bit of eavesdropping wouldn't hurt. Most of the townsfolk who aren't taking part in the fighting are hiding in their houses, but from what he can gather, their language has evolved considerably. They are actually able to speak seemingly well, especially for them. And in fact, some of it has changed so much that Zamasu can barely make out the words on all the signage that is around the town. He can vaguely understand that that must mean tavern, or that's a blacksmith there. So he decides to check the local temple out. Is his visage intact there? What of Raoud? Was he well respected too? He really liked that one. And sure enough, it is. It is decorated with some marvellous stained glass windows that show his likeness alongside Raoud and his successors. The sight of the lesser creatures reaching to him, Zamasu, adorned with riches and splendour, fills the Kai with pride, which is very unbecoming for someone of his ilk, but no matter. No other Kais or Goasus watching. He gazes around a little further. From the statues commemorating all the leaders of his church, he learns that the current prophet is named Carnil, and is supposedly the greatest prophet of them all. He'll be the judge of that. But wait, something isn't right here. Prophet Carpen, the one after Raoud, is missing. He was supposed to be the next in line after Raoud. That's very strange. He quite liked that young barbarian too. Very eager. He stops a local priestess who's just walking around and asks about Carnil. She scoffs at him for being a mere ignorant peasant that knows nothing about the gift of the great creator. Zamasu decides to keep asking questions about this. Too many questions, it seems. After a while of this, the mentor seems suspicious and prods the cloak, which is a little billowy for her liking. Here. Are you the one of the Carpanian spies? Because if you are, then I must ask you to leave. You have no business inside these great walls. What say you? Zamasu tries to play his role of a dumb peasant for a little bit longer, but he feels that this is actually beneath him, and therefore he ends up actually acting like a really poor interpretation of a dumb peasant. Carpelian spies? Never heard of them. The priestess is having none of this tomfoolery and calls the guards on him. Wait, why would a temple need a holding cell? Were things really that bad with these so-called Carpenian spies? They will deal with him after the battle, it seems, when their king will teach his kind a lesson. Zamasu decides not to take action against them right now. He wants to see this king up close. He's got some time to contemplate after all. In silence, Zamasu figures out how he will handle this predicament. Kind of handle it so that means he doesn't go too ham without resorting to the time ring. When he notices that someone is with him in this cell, looking at him, he is not alone. This someone is a very peculiar looking barbarian, looking pretty sickly and pale. Yes, these creatures were as big as before, but this is still pretty small and sleek for a barbarian. He's not very large and muscular like the others, being rather skinny in fact. His eyes are a purplish tint instead of the blue. "Why did they put you in here, stranger?" he asks politely, his diction being rather eloquent despite his meek form. Zamasu decides to grant him dialogue for the moment. I mean, honestly, he could do with something interesting going down. "I'm here because I wanted to be here." "Oh, I see. Clever. Trying to avoid army service, I suppose." The creature smiles at Zamasu, showing its white teeth. "Tell me, what is the purpose of this war?" The creature eyes Zamasu, puzzled. Where has this guy been all this time if he has no clue about the incident going down before their very eyes? For a moment, this guy is thinking that his new cellmate here is probably playing the fool, but he decides to tell him anyway, in case he is rather foolish and he stepped out of line. "This is not merely a childish squabble, stranger. This is a centuries-old war between the Ralwadians and Carpenians. This whole thing, it started around the ideas that they had. You see, they have different ideas about the Creator's will and what the Creator had intended for our kind." Zamasu's eyes widen. This was all about him. But Carpen's people had turned against Rawad? It's a shame. What are those ideas, if I may ask? At this point, even this feeble barbarian is becoming pretty suspicious. "Who are you? How can you not even know the basic ideas of the Creator? Everyone does, even the poor folk who can't even read. What's your deal?" he asks. "Answer my questions and I shall answer yours, friend." This whole thing started because the Rawadians believed that the Chronicle is everything. The legendary book taught us how to be who we are and what we are about to become. The words of the Creator himself are written into these holy scrolls. Those lessons need to be attributed to everything that we do. However, the Carpenians think that these are more like guidelines that are helping us to grow instead of hard and fast rules that should be stuck to. More of an interpretation. The barbarian smiles. I believe that they are both idiots. Zamasu is fascinated hearing this jaded being come alive as his vitriol bubbles to the surface. "I believe that there is no Creator. There never was. Rawad made the whole thing up. The Creator was merely an idea that was used to rule over my people through fear. Though, if I had to side with one, I would side with the Carpenians. At least they have some kind of wiggle room." Zamasu's getting rather intrigued by this creature, as the language that it uses is pretty advanced, even more advanced than the townsfolk. This one surely could read. Maybe it was a scholar. "So, what's your story?" "Your turn." Barbarian continues to smile. Zamasu laughs coldly and gestures at the barbarian. "Give me your hand. This should answer your question." After a moment's hesitation, the creature agrees with this. The hand is scaly and cold, but in just a fraction of a second, Zamasu uses Kaikai to transport them both to a nearby forest, the same area that he was in when he first arrived in this timeline. The barbarian is truly shocked, hiding in the shadows from the sun that's blinding him. He hasn't seen the sun in ages as well. Then he drops his disguise. "This is a trick, right?" The barbarian doesn't look fazed by the way he looks. "You said you didn't believe in me. Well, here I am. Do I look like a trick to you?" The barbarian hesitates. Then, with a lot of effort, gathers some energy into his hand and spits out a small ki blast at Zamasu, but the Kai deflects it with ease. That was the most pathetic and yet impressive thing I've seen in my entire life. Tell me, is this ability common amongst your species? No. The Carpanians wanted to study the properties and potential of these powers. They were remarkable. But the Rawedians didn't like that one bit. They decided to hunt down most of the people who possessed this gift. You can say that this is what started the war. To my knowledge, I am the last. I haven't shown anyone before. You should be honored. Zamasu smiles, now very, very intrigued by this pathetic-looking creature, more so than before. At least he knows how this all started, for real this time. What is your name? Dekraf, the barbarian mutters. Pathetic. But listen, Dekraf, this is your lucky day, because I'm in the market for a new prophet, and you and I have a war to end. And that's where we're going to be leaving things for right now. So what do you guys think? Do you think that these two could end this tussle without any cheap tricks involved? What is Dekraf's deal, and where did he get those powers? Leave a comment below, and let's get this discussion going. And I shall see you in the next video. Catch you later.